Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Maya's webinar of today. This is Anika, live from Milan. I'm a teacher at Maya's Mervilli. And so due to the unusual circumstances caused by the coronavirus, we are running webinars this week. And thank you all for joining us. So this will be a little different from our usual face-to-face lessons, as I will be explaining some activities, and you will be mostly listening to it. But if you have any questions at any time or any comments or anything you want to share, feel free to write it in the comment section below at any time. Right. So today you're going to first begin with our first activity called Be Prepared. So let's get started. First, we are going to talk about modal verbs. We're going to talk about how to give advice using those modal verbs. And we're going to talk about how to prepare for different occasions. Right. So, in your opinion, what are the worst mistakes someone can make when attending a job interview? Right. So let's talk about job interview. There could be one of the very common mistakes that comes to mind is being late. Being late can be can show carelessness or not being responsible. So being late can be an example. So if you can think of other examples of mistakes that you can make during job interviews, please feel free to write it down in the comment section below. Right. What other mistakes could there be? Probably not dressing up properly could be a mistake during job interviews. Have you ever made these mistakes during job interviews? I have been late once, but I remember calling up the interviewer and telling them I would be 10 minutes late due to a work commitment. Right. What about you? If you have ever made any mistakes during a job interview, please feel free to share it. Right? Don't be afraid to make mistakes while writing. I will be happy to correct you. Moving on. So let's read about some do's and don'ts. All right. Thank you, Emanuela, for your lovely comment. Asking about money too soon. Right. I think that's that is definitely a mistake that comes to mind. Asking for money can make you come across as too forward, too direct. So yes, definitely it's a mistake. So let's talk about do's and don'ts. Do's and don'ts is an expression to talk about advice. Do's definitely refers to things that you should do, and don'ts are the things you shouldn't do. So let's read about it. When preparing for an interview, there are a few important things to remember. You should always go over potential interview questions and practice your answers, right? You should always go over potential interview questions. Go over is a very useful phrasal verb, which means to review something. So you want to review the interview questions and perhaps practice them or rehearse in front of a mirror, if that helps. Before an exam, you want to go over your notes and make sure you remember everything. So go over. Let's continue. You ought to dress nicely, right? Ought to is an expression that is similar to should. It's synonymous to should. When you give advice, you ought to do something. So you ought to dress nicely. Unless you live in Hawaii, you had better not turn up to an interview in shorts and t-shirts. Now, turn up to an so if you turn up somewhere or if you show up somewhere, you arrive there, right? So let me write that down. Turn up or show up means to arrive. Okay, so when you turn up in an interview or you ought to dress nicely. Let's talk about, let's continue. Unless you live in Hawaii, you better not turn up to an interview in shorts and t-shirt. Right. So you may want to, for a proper job interview, you may want to look formal with the shirt, with a collar, shorts and t-shirts. Idea to keep up with in applying to with. I mean, so if um, you updated on that about those recent about them. If technology, for example, aware of it, Modal comes out, you buy new technology. You keep up with, so you're updated. It's all keep up with, doing this, you will become knowledgeable in candidate. You will just, that mean something to give a certain to someone. You talk that you know about the company that you're applying to or the fields that you're looking job in. If you are late, on the other hand, to an interview without informing the interviewer, you come across as careless or irresponsible. Remember, first impressions are very important, so follow these simple steps to make sure you stand out from the crowd. So what do you think stand out means? So stand out is when you are different from a particular group, right? So when you stand out in and there are many candidates in an interview, so if you stand out, you make a better or different impression than the others, hopefully in a better way. So if you stand out in an exam, you do better than the others. Right, so let's get to some exercises here. So we talked about many phrasal verbs in this little article here. So the meanings are listed down. The definitions or synonyms are here, so you can see on the right. And try to remember what the phrasal verb is that we discussed, right? So if you know them, feel free to write them in the comment section. Do you remember what the phrasal verb is for arrive, to arrive? All right. If you have any questions as well, do not hesitate to post them. So to arrive is to turn up, right? To turn up, or you could also say show up, has the same meaning. To review something, such as questions that can come up during the interview or your notes before your exam. So to review something is to go over something, right? So do you think it's a good idea to go over interview questions, or does it make you more nervous? Right, so some people prefer not to go over interview questions. What about you? Feel free to share. To give a certain impression, right? To give a certain impression. Right, very good, Nicole. So to give a certain impression would be to come across as, all right? So when you come across as, when you show up on time and you dress nicely for an interview, you come off as a good or responsible employee, right? You come across as a good candidate. To be different from the others, could hopefully in a good way, right? Is to, right? To stand out, right? To stand out among other candidates, or to stand out in a group of people. To be up to date. So we were talking about examples like to be up to date with technology or fashion. So to be up to date can also be. Right, okay, I can see a lot of answers here. Well done, Nicole, Christina, Federica, and Salvi. So up to date, very good, Nicole, to keep up with, right? To keep up with something. All right, so any questions here? Okay, well done, everybody. We're gonna move on. Let's talk about more advice, right? More do's and don'ts for an interview. How do you prepare for an interview? So we're gonna use this phrasal verbs with this exercise. Number one, so if you know the answers, you can just type it right in. A well-written CV will help you blank from other candidates. So you want to say you want to be different from the other candidates, right? So you stand out from the other. You should never blank late to an interview, right? So what you mean to say is to arrive late at the interview. Got it? To turn up to an interview. You ought to blank the information, right? Well done, Salvi. So number good, Nicole. So you ought to, number three, you ought to blank the information on your CV to make sure it is correct and up to date. You need to. What do you think? So you want to review the information on your CV. What's the phrasal verb for that? You want to go back and check it. So it would be, right, so it takes me to receive your comments. So I'm just giving a little bit of time there. So you ought to go over the information. Very good, Simona and Christina. To be a good candidate, you must blank new industry. So number 4. Okay, so to be a good candidate, you must blank in your industry. Inform yourself about them. You need to be up to date. So you come across more knowledgeable, right? Very with industry. Pay language, since straight, right? Sit up straight is to sit up. Well, I wasn't sitting up straight, so not slouch like that, but sit up straight. Contact, smile, and fidget. So number 5, well done, Nicole. So smile and don't fidget. Help you come across as and focused. Right. Questions so far? Okay. It's Salvi and Chris. So guys, for interview, do you them? They all look like really good advice. So fidget. The word fidget may not gonna explain it. So you make move hands on your feet when you're nervous, right? Some people play with their fingers or something near them, play with their pen around them. But fidget is when you move in a nervous way. Okay, so let's discuss some questions here. What do you think makes people stand out in an interview? So I definitely think that people's knowledge in that field makes them stand out. What do you think? Do you have any other ideas on what makes people stand out in an interview? People may stand out also for their experience. Like if someone has had a lot of experience, they could stand out. Have you ever turned up late to an important event? Right. Feel free to share if something interesting happened to you. So have you ever turned up late? Well, as for me, I have turned up late to one interview that I can think of because of work commitment, and I made sure to contact my interviewer and let them know that I would be 10 minutes late. Right. What about you? Have you ever been late to a meeting, an event, or an exam? Do you often go over possible questions before an interview? Right. So there are a list of possible questions you can go over on the internet and think of possible answers to prepare for an interview. So do you often do that? I definitely find it very useful to do that and to practice, probably in front of a mirror. Probably not in front of a mirror, but just to go over it in my head so I feel better prepared. So let's talk about question number 4. Is it better to come across as excited and eager or quiet and confident? So, very different kind of attitudes there, excited and eager. And quiet and confident. Excited and eager would be more like enthusiastic, talking a lot, probably smiling a lot, right? Quiet and confident. Confident is definitely something very positive, but it's a kind of different attitude. So I definitely think that both could work, unless they are on the extreme end. Like if someone is over excited or over confident or too quiet, it's not good, but a mixture of things would be good. What do you think? Do you have something specific in mind that you prefer, or a specific way that you prefer to behave? Do you prefer to be excited and eager, or do you prefer to appear quiet and confident? Right. I think it also depends on people's personality. So some comments coming up here. So Manuela says, I always arrive in advance, at least 15 minutes. Oh, that's a very good attitude, Emanuele. So arriving 15 minutes early is definitely better than being just they're just in time or even later. And Salvi says the best thing is to be calm and confident. Right. So good advice. Sometimes if you're too excited, you may say things you don't mean to say. So yeah, I think I agree with you. So never nervous. Right. Yes. I find it hard not to feel nervous before an interview. But yeah, I think if you could never be nervous, it will definitely go much better. Right. So if you have any more tips, feel free to share at any time. Okay. So prior planning and preparation. Which modal verbs do you know? Which semi-modal verbs do you know? What are some of them? Right. So here are some modal verbs we're going to observe and talk about. So let's talk about examples of the following. How you should dress you. Let's talk about how you should. So should is I'm guessing you're probably familiar with the word should. So this is used to give advice, something that is a good idea, right? So should refers to a good idea. So how do you think you should dress for an interview? I think you should formally for an interview, unless you have a specific job as where you have to wear something different. So if not, it's better to keep things simple and probably not loud colors. Loud colors like fluorescent colors or red. So I think you should dress in neutral colors and should wear formal clothes. Let's talk about. So if you don't agree with me, you may also want to. So something you had better not say in an interview. So you had usually in contraction form better not. Expression to talk about something that you shouldn't do, and if you do it, it can cause bad. So had better. So let me write that down for you. Not do it. It will cause seriously. Right. This question coming up here is equals well. The word but is more first, like if I am loud, I speak loud, like very high volume. That's the most common meaning of loud. But if I say loud colors, it means bright. Yes. In terms of colors, loud colors are bright colors. But if you talk about sound, it means high volume. That's a good question there. And so we were talking about had better not. Oh, but had better not. I have typed no by mistake, but not. So something that you had better not do, better not say in an interview. Not sure if you have a connection problem. Okay, we're good now. So if you had better not, something you had better not say in an interview. Well, I'm going to use an example that we have got from Emanuele. He says that something you had better not say is ask about your salary. Yeah, that could be bad. Or if there's anything else you think you had better not say in an interview, please feel free to share. Let's talk about something you don't have to bring to an interview. So don't have to, what does that mean? Many students think that don't have to is the same as mustn't, but it's not. Don't have to means something that is not necessary. All right, so one comment from Salvi here. Do not talk immediately about holidays and various problems. I love that suggestion. So if you talk about holidays and problems already, that can cause like, you'd better not do that. So don't have to, let's get on with that. So don't have to refers to something not necessary, but you can do it. Not necessary, but can do. For example, something you don't have to bring to an interview. So you don't have to bring your CV to an interview. Well, it depends. I mean, in the past, I should say, you had to bring your CV in an interview. But from my experience, like I think you don't have to bring your CV to the interview. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Or do you think it's necessary to bring your CV? I think you don't have to, but you can bring it if you want to, of course. Something you ought to do in an interview. We talked about ought to before. So ought to is the same as should, right? Ought to is should. So ought to is very common everywhere. It depends on the country or where you grew up. I personally never use ought to, but in some countries or some cities, they use this expression. So the question is something you ought to do in an interview. I think you ought to smile in an interview. I think that always makes you come across. I mean, if you smile, you come across as friendly. So I think you ought to do that. Something you mustn't do in an interview. So mustn't. Okay, so it depends on company, I think. Yes, a lot of things depend on the company that you're applying for, definitely. Right, so let's talk about mustn't. So something you mustn't do in an interview. Again, this is not the same as don't have to. Don't have to refers to something not necessary but possible. Mustn't instead is a prohibition. Notice that the first T here is silent. So it's not mustn't, but it's mustn't. And it's a prohibition. Okay, so something you mustn't do in an interview, I would say, is to be impolite, right? So if you are rude, if you're impolite, that is not good. And if you come across as a rude person, it's never good. So impolite. Impolite is the opposite of polite, which means rude. Christina here says, you mustn't be shy. So you mustn't be shy. The do is not necessary here. So I like that advice. You mustn't be shy. Well, mustn't, I would say, could come across as like too strong, like something that's prohibited. So if you're prohibited to be shy, that may sound a bit too much. So you may want to say you shouldn't be shy. Yeah, I would say you shouldn't be shy. It's better not to be. So you mustn't be rude. I agree with that. Like it's more of it's a stronger obligation than shouldn't. Let's talk about something you should do before an interview. So I think you should. It's a good idea to go over interview questions, and you should find out more about the company you're applying for. Right? So what do you think? Is there anything else you should do before an interview? Let's talk about the last point here, something you have got to bring to an interview. So have got to is the same as have to. Let me write that down. Again, this is very similar to must. So it's an obligation. So have got to or have to is similar to must, except that must is more commonly used for public laws or something that applies to a lot of people. For example, you must drive on the right. You mustn't you mustn't break the rules and so on. Have got to is more about a personal obligation. So you have got to, something you've got to bring to an interview. What is something you've got to bring? I would say you've got to bring your previous work if it's necessary. So if you're applying for a job as a journalist, you may want to bring some samples of your writing just to show the interviewer. Or if you're applying as a photographer, you may want to bring some of your previous work. So you've got to bring some of your previous work. Okay. Moving on. Okay. So let's talk about some of these pictures. These people all have an interview coming up. Right. So Nicole says you have got to bring your references. Right, that's a good advice. So many companies need to contact references from your previous jobs to know a little bit about you. So I think that's a great idea. So let's look at these pictures below. These people all have an interview coming up. Give them some advice to help them be at their best. What could they do differently? Right, so they've all made mistakes. So let's look at the first picture. So this woman here, I think if she was applying for a more in the field of entertainment, she looks appropriate for the interview. However, for an official job, she shouldn't be wearing such colorful outfits. And she should wear neutral colors and more formal clothing, right? So if you have something more to add, there. The second person, the second photo that you can see, the guy here looks very informal. So he's wearing shorts, his hair is messy, and he does not look like he's going to an interview. So I think he'd better wear something formal. He'd better change into something more appropriate. So if he doesn't, he will definitely not get the job. So let's look at the third photo here. I think so he looked quite messy and he also looks very nervous. So I think he should not turn up to an interview like this. He will come across as messy and careless. So in order for him to stand out, he has to clean up to look more organized. And it's better for him to probably he should go over some interview questions so he wouldn't come across as so nervous and worried. And definitely he should leave at home. Okay. Now, right. So that was all for an interview. Now we are going to switch to a different activity, a lighter topic. So let's get on with it. We're going to talk about dreams, right? Them, or we all see them. So let's discuss about dreams. So we're going to talk about dreams. Although we don't only dream when we're sleeping, sometimes we do daydream. We're going to talk about dreams vocabulary and types of dreams, interpreting dreams, and describe. Okay, let's discuss these questions about sleep and dreams. Are you a good sleeper or a bad sleeper? Right, feel free to share. Are you a good sleeper or a bad sleeper? Well, I am in general a good. In a while, if I have something in mind or if I have too much work, I turn into a bad sleeper. How long do you sleep for on average? Average, right? So Salvi is a very good sleeper. That's right. So any secrets you have you want to share with us? How do you be a good sleeper? So how long do you usually sleep for on average? So on average, like a median amount of sleep. Every day is the same, but on average, like one day or the next. I sleep 7 hours on, right? People say that you need 8 hours of sleep, but I think that will be 7 hours, except that the weekends could be. What about you guys? How do you usually sleep? I'm curious to know. Christina's a good sleeper, good to know. All right, so I hope you guys sleep a recommended time, or at a time it may not always be. So early like a grandmother, right? I know because and waking up early is the key to being actually successful. So that's great. So note that, everybody. And number 3, did you sleep well last night or badly? What about last night? So I slept well last night. Right, I did not sleep badly. What about you guys? Did you sleep well? Christina usually sleeps 7 or 8 hours. Great, that's great. Number 4, when you wake up, do you remember your dreams? When I wake up, so what about you? Do you remember your dreams? So wake up, the phrasal verb wake up is when you open your eyes after you, when you don't sleep anymore. You open your eyes, wake up. So I wake up, I remember dreams when that I usually see just before waking up, but I usually forget them if I've seen them earlier in the night. What about you? Do you remember your dreams when you wake up? Right. So I think most people don't remember their dreams, but some people remember the really special ones. Okay. Okay, let's talk about some dreams vocabulary. What are the differences between these kinds of dreams? So there are different words in the English language to explain dreams. Daydream. So what is a daydream? Daydream is not the typical type of dream that we see when we are sleeping, but when you are awake and wishing for something. So you sit down and think about traveling to a beautiful holiday destination. You're daydreaming. So you're just thinking about it, daydreaming. So do you often daydream? Okay, so more comments coming up here. So Manuela says, I usually have or make nightmares after having pizza or dinner, right? I usually have nightmares, not make nightmares. after having pizza on dinner. Oh, that is interesting. So let me write that down. Have nightmares. Okay. So having nightmares after a specific food is something that doesn't happen to me usually, but different people may have different type of reactions to food. Right. So what about the others? Do you have nightmares when you have pizza or some specific food? Right. That's really curious. Okay, so for most of these words, we use the verb have, right? So have a nightmare. So nightmare is definitely a bad dream. When you wake up feeling scared, wake up in cold sweat, you have a nightmare. So do you guys have nightmares? Talk about it if you want to share. Let's talk about lucid dream. This is something very interesting. When you have a lucid dream, you are aware that you're dreaming, right? Did you ever have a lucid dream? I'm curious to know. Please feel free to let us know if you have ever had a lucid dream. So if you are, imagine being aware that you are dreaming, so you could do anything you want. You could even fly around if you want. Recurring dream, what does that mean? So recurring dream is a dream that happens often, like you frequently see that dream, or repeatedly see that dream. That's a recurring dream. Do you have any recurring dreams? So if you would like to share, tell us about it. Premonition in a dream. So premonition, the word means to be able to see the future. So to have a premonition, if you have a premonition, you can predict something. So some people can see it in a dream and then it comes true after a while. So have you ever had a premonition in a dream? I have personally never had a premonition in a dream, but I have a friend who did. But premonition usually refers to something bad, like something not positive. But predictions can be positive as well. So Manuela continues, when I was a child, I dreamt three numbers, or the number 3. Right, then I asked my dad to play them on the lottery, and I made Terno in Lotto. Oh, wow, that's amazing. So you did have a premonition in your dream. That's really great. That's a very unique dream that you had. Bruno says, I have a nightmare when I think of debt. I have nightmares, plural, when I think of debt. Right, debt can be a very stressful situation. So I can understand what you mean. So when you think of debt, you have nightmare. Okay. So let's move on. Nicola says, I'd like to have premonition about the lottery. Yeah, me too. I wish I had that. Right. Okay. What do you usually dream about? Feel free to share, like something, again, do you see any recurring dreams? Do you see any, have you ever seen any premonitions, like the lottery number, like Emanuele? Or have you ever seen, have you ever been in a lucid dream, right? What do you usually dream about? So very often I dream about my teeth falling off. Not very often, like sometimes I see my teeth falling off and that's really scary. Salvi says falling always. Yeah, that happens. Me too, right? If you see yourself falling, that can like feel like, and you wake up with a start, yeah, that could be scary. So falling. Right. Any other dreams that you can think of? Does anyone see your teeth falling off? Or or something like I don't know, doing things, being at work. I often dream about my school days. Very often, the setting of my dreams are in my school where I used to go. Right. So here there is a list of examples of dreams. So falling is the first one, as Salvi said. So some people dream of flying. That must be wonderful. I have never dreamt of flying. So must feel really great. Being naked, wow, that's scary, especially when you have like a public speaking event going on. Yeah, some people see being naked. Exams, right? So we have some more comments coming up. Being in a sort of maze and can't find the exit. Wow, that is scary. Yeah. So being in a maze. Bruno says, I dream of traveling the world. Right. I dream of traveling the world. So I imagine you daydreaming about traveling the world. Is that right? Do you mean daydreaming, or do you actually see it when you're sleeping? I'm curious about that. So moving on with the list here. So some people dream about exams. So I always dreamt of exams when I had them. And sometimes I saw myself being late for exams. Right. So no matter what I do, I was late and I forgot something and I had to get back to get that thing. And then again, I was late. So has it happened to you? Have you ever seen you were late for exams? So let's talk about snakes or scary things. So a lot of people see animals in dreams. So snakes, right, camels and things like that. So what about you? Have you ever seen any creatures or animals? Teeth. Yeah, so some people see teeth falling off, just like I talked about. Right. So Nicole says, sometimes in my dreams, I can't speak. That is, yeah, I have never had that, but I have heard people having that dream, not being able to speak. That sounds scary. Right. I think somehow we remember the bad dreams more often than the really good ones. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Or probably it's the other way around. Okay, so let's talk about chasing. What does chasing mean? So if someone or something chases you, they run after you. So to chase equals to run after. So if an animal like a dog is chasing you, it's running after you. Have you ever seen anything chasing you in your dreams? Well, that could be scary or creepy. So, moving on. How do you interpret each of these types of dreams? So, different dreams can mean different things. I'm not an expert in this, but I think you guys might have better ideas than me. So here's an example here. Falling means a loss of control and insecurity. So I think so. Probably what's related to life actually affects our dreams. So falling could mean secure or loss of control. So what do you think? Do you agree with that? Or do you think falling means something else? So I think interpretations of dream could be from very different angles. Like it could have like spiritual meanings or psychological meanings or whatever different people believe in. What do you think falling means to you? What Bruno says, I have an atavistic fear, that of snakes, right? So you are you have a phobia for snakes. That's I think I also have a phobia for snakes. They are pretty scary. So seeing them in a dream can be very bad. Could be a total nightmare. So, so any other opinion about what falling means? Please feel free to share. Flying. So what do you think flying? I would say I don't really know, but it's kind of the opposite of falling. It probably means that you feel secured and happy. Um, do you think about feeling happy about something or something? Manuel says teeth often means a death of relative. Ah, right. You know, it's the same in the country where I grew up, Bangladesh, and my mother told me the same. The tree premonition for a relative, but or how true I have seen it many. Nobody passed like. I mean, it's not true. What do you think? Do you has it found this in? So Bruno's young. I often flying. Oh, I would love to dream. Have never. What was? Did you enjoy? Right. What I think it means that you feel exposed. I would see that before up or some public that I think doing nervous about exposed or about scary. What do you think? Do you think it's right? So I mean, to me, straightforward. If you have you're in an exactly you're worried about, I think is simply an exam. Have an exam and you in an exam. You are scary. Exams are usually scary. I mean, but of stress. So scary thing. One of you have so Bruno has so that kind to see. You know, some animals can be nice, like very nice. Camel is really peaceful. But I think they represent. Yeah. What or do you know? Maybe supers that you think could. Who knows? Let's talk. So we have to being a permanent relatives, right? Have you ever you? Let's talk about change. So change refers to some. What if a person is probably by that person? You think you feel scared that someone or something might harm you. Threatened. Let me write that down. Feeling that someone or something might harm you. So I think chasing means you feel threatened by something. So Nicole says maybe chasing means to have a lot of responsibility to afford. All right, to have a lot of responsibility. Could be true. Yeah. I mean that makes sense. Like you feel like the responsibilities are coming at you, right? So, all right. Thank you for your ideas. All right. Any questions so far? Any doubts or confusion, please feel free to, please don't hesitate to write them down. Okay, so here's an interesting website you can see here. You can go to and read the interpretation of common dreams. It's called www.dream. Oops, sorry about that. www.dreammoods.com. Let me type it out. Okay, if you're interested, check it out. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left when we're going to review some words we talked about today. Okay, so I will give you definitions and try to remember those words, okay? So or expressions, could be a modal verb or whatever it is, think of it. So what's the expression which means that if you do it, there will be some bad consequences? For example, be rude to the interviewer. I blank rude to the interviewer. So what's the expression for when you feel when you know there will be a bad consequence if you do it? If you know the answer, please write it down in the comment section below. I had better not. Very good. So as I was saying, had better not is usually contracted. So we would put apostrophe D. So I'd better not be rude. I'd better not. What's the expression for when you give a certain impression to someone? You give a certain impression to someone. For example, if you are rude, you a bad candidate for the job. Or if you're late, you irresponsible person. Okay, so it consists of 3 words. So the expression is come across as. To come across as something is to give a certain impression. So if you are, if you smile, you come across as friendly. Okay. What's the expression for when you don't really see a dream when you're sleeping, but come across as a very good, Simona. Stand out in a bad, okay, good, Simona, come across, stand out in a bad way. All right, so stand out is different from come across as. Stand out is to be different from others. So I'll give 2 examples with these 2 expressions. So she stands out because of her experience in teaching, because she has had so many years of experience and the other candidates haven't had so many experiences. She stands out. She's different. Come across as, I'll say, because she is very quiet, she comes across as unfriendly. Right? She comes across as an unfriendly person, which is not always true. Some people are just naturally quiet, although they come across as Non-friendly. Okay, guys, so that's all for today. Thank you for joining me for the webinar, and I hope to see you very soon. So hope our classes will begin soon enough. We'll keep you informed. Have a great day, and for your participation. Bye.